Today, we have a very special episode for you. Mariners broadcasters Aaron Goldsmith and Gary Hill Jr. join the show for a lengthy discussion about baseball, friendship, and of course, Colby's worthless endeavor.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, September 6, 2024. This is TonaI Gonzalez for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, Colby and I sit down with Mariners broadcasters Aaron Goldsmith and Gary Hill Jr. for a very fun discussion. We cover a lot of stuff, including a really cool story on how Aaron and Gary first met, what makes Cal Raleigh so special, and of course, we had to revisit one of the best moments, if not the best moment in the history of this podcast, and a whole lot more. Before we get into all that, shout out to our title sponsor today, PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the promo code LockedOnMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description, and you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. All right, let's visit with Gary and Aaron. Joining us now from St. Louis is not just one voice of your Seattle Mariners, but two voices of your Seattle Mariners. Longtime friend of the show, Gary Hill Jr., and making his second appearance here on Locked On Mariners, Aaron Goldsmith. Gary, Aaron, welcome back. Thanks for doing this.
What's up, guys? Be here.
So, Aaron, I want to start with you because you guys are obviously in St. Louis, like I mentioned. This was a place that I think a lot of people assumed you might have, ended up at long term, but that wound up not being the case. And I want to go back to when you made that announcement. I think it was last year, maybe 2022. Can't remember exactly. But you said, no, I love being in Seattle. My family loves being in Seattle. So I wanted to specifically ask you, thinking back on that time and just thinking back on your time in Seattle, is there a moment, a memory that you can pinpoint? Because obviously I'm sure there was a lot of logistical and financial reasons for staying in Seattle and staying in Washington. But from an emotional standpoint, can you pinpoint maybe like a moment where you went like, yeah, this is where I want to be long term?
Well, Ty, I don't know what you're talking about. This is my first time in St. Louis.
Right.
This is all foreign. Yeah. No.
Are you even in St. Louis? Yeah, it's just a curtain back there.
There's no way to know. I could be anywhere.
Right.
I could be down the street. I could be in Canada right now, for all you know.
That's right. Maybe you're just in the other room right here.
There is one moment that does stand out when I was going through that decision, and my family, my wife and I were going through it, and that is, I remember I was just scrolling on my phone one day, trying to escape reality, and I stumbled on randomly a highlight. You guys probably remember it. It was 2 years ago when the Braves came to T-Mobile Park in September, and the Mariners won 2 out of 3. And there was that one game in particular where Julio had, I think it was his first multi-homer game. He hit one off the manual scoreboard to tie it up off of Kenley Jansen. The Mariners walked it off. There was a highlight from that game that I just happened to scroll on. And it was a sold-out T-Mobile Park, and the place was going crazy, obviously. And it was a big moment like that Julio home run. And I remember seeing that highlight and thinking, oh, that would be really hard to not be a part of anymore. And obviously, there are great crowds in other ballparks and great energy and great moments and all those things. But I, like Gary does, I felt and still feel so much attached to all of that, right? All of the emotions of that being the team that you cover and follow and that you're a part of and that your kids root for and that the ballpark that you show up to work at half of the season. And I don't know if that moment tipped me over, but it was definitely one of the things that really stands out in terms of just further solidifying in my mind the connection that I feel in Seattle.
Listening to you and Blow on the broadcast yesterday, I think Blow came up with the idea that he wants to highlight some Cardinals players with you. And that gave you pause a little bit there. Like, I know he mentioned Albert Pujols, and you were like, Maybe because I think you wanted to do more of like Cardinals players that not a lot of people know about, or maybe have forgotten about, what have you. But you did mention Stan the Man, and this reminded me of something. Colin Snyder, who of course is pitching out of the Mariners bullpen right now, was on a TikTok video with our friends TJ and Lyle from Marine Lair, and I can't remember what the prompt was. I think it was some sort of trivia or something. Maybe they were asking about nicknames. They brought up Stan the Man. Colin Snyder was like, "Who is that?" So Goldie, you're gonna need to put Colin Snyder on game.
I thought you were going to lead us down a path of like Colin Snyder grew up idolizing Sam or something.
Nope. He doesn't even know who the guy is, and I think that's something that might need to be rectified here. Maybe you can help out with that.
Well, as Gary knows, I do a great Stan Musial batting stance impression, so I think maybe I'll have to break
you can start
out.
Right there.
Yeah, I'll start with that out on the field later today.
Now, speaking of players that were born in Denora, Pennsylvania, Ken Griffey Jr. was there with you guys the last couple days in Oakland. I know both of you guys got to visit with him. Now, Gary, I saw a picture of you from our good friend Shannon Dreyer in the booth of you and Ken sitting next to one another on the mics. How was that?
Oh, just normal, everyday work stuff. You go to work, stop, and Ken Griffey Jr. just subtle stuff that's just next to you on a random day. Yeah, which for anyone my age that grew up in Seattle, that never gets old. Just talking to Ken Griffey Jr., hanging out with Ken Griffey Jr. And I know Aaron feels this way too. We ended up talking to him forever just about baseball. And it's the coolest thing in the world because it's Ken Griffey Jr. And I love it so much. One of my favorite times was a couple of years ago when we went to Tokyo, and Ken Griffey Jr. went as a part of, he was the ambassador for the Mariners, and Ricky Henderson was the ambassador for the A's. And my wife went too, and she still talks about this every day. There was a big reception right before the game. And, there's people everywhere. And we just ended up in this group. And Ken Griffey Jr. is just telling one story after another. And my wife, who also grew up in Tacoma, and we met in high school. And so we have the same sort of Griffey experience. And it's something that, no matter how long I do this, no matter the people I run across, and stuff becomes normal. Like you see Logan Gilbert every day and Cal Raleigh every day, and there's a normalcy to that. But when you run into Ken Griffey Jr., there is that moment that takes you back to childhood, to a kid, to pinch yourself. And I think there are people like that for everybody, no matter your stature. There's people like that for Ken Griffey Jr. And it's one of the things I love the most about this game is yesterday I was hanging out with Ken Griffey Jr. Tomorrow, I'm going to go to a Jose Oquendo signing at Busch Stadium, which is almost as cool.
And for Goldie, that's cooler than Griffey, obviously.
Gary's love for Jose Oquendo is, I gotta say, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive.
So, who are some random Cardinals that you would, now that you've actually had maybe some time to marinate on Blow's prompt for you yesterday? Who are some random Cardinals that you might want to highlight the next few days?
Yeah, by the way, for those who missed it, and many people easily could have, Blow just randomly started inventing this game in the middle of the broadcast and like throwing it out to me like I knew the rules of what was happening, and then was basically just like, I want you to do a ton of work and then report back to me. Yeah. Yeah, I could hear the surprise and the confusion and all of that. I was, and the other thing, if you remember, is that I was trying to call a game while keeping up with all of this. So yeah, but apparently he wants like to hit on one like franchise icon each day. Is that kind of what you guys picked up on?
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it seemed
mean-
like you more so wanted to talk about guys who are more like forgotten or, you know, what have you, right? Like the guys that you really liked, like the unsung heroes, essentially, of the Cardinals.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the funny thing was that, which I don't know how entertaining that would be for like anyone watching. To be like,
I'd like
honest.
it as a nerd. I'd like it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Mike threw out Albert Pujols as a name, and as I think I said, I'm like, well, we all watched him play as of like 2 years ago. And truthfully, it was really hard for me because that was my King Griffey Jr. Like my when I became really aware of baseball and like being a smarter baseball fan, as smart as you can be when you're in middle school or early high school. Like that was right when Albert came on the scene, right? Like right when Ichiro came on the scene for Seattle is when Albert came on the scene in St. Louis. And I didn't know how spoiled I would be watching him. And so Albert is the closest that I have to King Griffey Jr. as a fan. And it was really hard for me to watch Pujols turn into what he turned into in Anaheim, and then having to watch that as often as we did, or as I did in the division, and watching him run on the grass to first base because his feet hurt so much and he couldn't run on the dirt. And obviously he still hit home runs. And when you would see that Pujols swing and that stance, and when the ball would jump off his bat, and being able to watch them count down from, you know, to 600 home runs or count up and then to 700 home runs, like that was really cool. But I remember talking to Gary about this over the years when Albert was in Anaheim. Like, it never felt like I was watching the same guy that I rooted for as a kid. I had a Pujols cardboard cutout in my room as a kid. And I really separated like the St. Louis Albert and the Anaheim Albert. But that was the guy. I mean, that was the clear, it's the chalk answer. But then again, Griffey's the chalk answer for the millions of Garys in the world, and as it should be. I mean, they're two iconic players. But yes, I think we're getting Stan the Man is the all-time guy. And I do love Stan because I think in part, I just would love to see a guy that does everything like Stan Musial play in today's game and just see what that would look like. But he was one of the greatest hitters of all time, obviously. I think we have to touch on Lou Brock, like especially since we were just in Oakland, and we're talking about Ricky and all the stolen bases. Like Lou is a guy, and then Bob Gibson would be the other, like kind of just total pillar of a franchise icon. So I'll be honest, I need to learn more of the rules before I know which one we're going to run out first. Blow did, and Gary heard this. He like harped on the bus back to me yesterday as to saving Stan for the final game, like to end on the highest note. So maybe that's Sunday's day game. But I'm learning this one as we go, just like you guys.
More from our conversation with Goldie and Gary in just a moment. But first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Ibotta. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all of your purchases so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and a whole lot more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the promo code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back by using the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. So you guys just got back from Oakland, of course, like we just talked about with Griffey being out there. That's going to be your last time out in Oakland. Obviously, that city has meant a lot to the sport of baseball, to the sports world in general, and now they've seen all of their teams leave, essentially. Now the Warriors are right across the bay, but for the most part, yeah, all those teams are gone now out of Oakland, and that ballpark. Over the last however many years, there aren't many flattering things you can say about it. That ballpark obviously has a lot of history in it. So, I'm sure you guys did a lot of reflection, both over your times, just covering the Mariners there, but just about what that ballpark and what that city has meant to baseball in general. What was going through your minds in the booth? And I'll start with Gary on this, just kind of thinking about Oakland and all that.
Mostly the fans in Oakland. That's what I've been thinking about. And I think for Mariner fans who went through this with the Sonics, I think we can all identify with the feelings and the bitterness and the anger that they are going through right now, because it is not their fault. Oakland has a very good baseball fan base, a very passionate baseball fan base, and they've seen a lot of history there. 21 playoff appearances in the time they've been in Oakland, and they've seen 6 World Series, winning 4 of them. And think about all the great players they've seen down through the years, from Reggie Jackson to Ricky Henderson to Mark McGwire. Go down the list. Dave Stewart. There's been a ton of them, and it's so sad to me knowing that I have kids that have nothing to do with the Sonics. No memories of the Sonics, because they've been gone the entire time they've been alive. So they have nothing to do with the NBA or basketball in general. And so I think about that next generation where they have no Major League Baseball. So all these stories, the father's sons and mother's daughters, that's not going to be passed down to the next generation. And that's who I was thinking about the whole time. The building is not great. We know that. The situation is not great, but the fans are the ones in Oakland that are getting the harm in all of this. And I think it's too bad. And my thoughts were entirely with them the entire time we were there.
The fans obviously are getting the short end here. The ballpark has a number of memories for me. It was the first big league game I ever called was at the Coliseum, which there's no better ballpark to make your major league debut in the Coliseum, because it never looks better to anyone than when you're making your major league debut there. Like you don't realize how horrible it is, because you're just so geeked up that you're in the big leagues, man. And so I vividly remember Felix pitching against the A's opening day of 2013 at the Coliseum. I remember Fernando Rodney being locked in the bathroom in the dugout there. A number of years ago, the press box elevator broke in the afternoon, and so to get down to the field, you had to walk the steps from the press box up to the upper level behind home plate, and then walk the steps, a different set of stairs, all the way down, or get on a separate elevator that was working and walk it all the way down. And I found it just such sweet poetry that on our final night, so after the second game at the Coliseum, wouldn't you know it, the press box elevator broke down. And it was just a long, sweet walk with Gary back to the bus. And I soaked in that walk, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I also remember there was a getaway day there where the bathrooms, like the sewage, got blocked and started coming up into the clubhouse. And so our guys had to shower in like the Raiders locker room or something. And I might have had to shower with the A's. So it's a horrible building, but it's also been completely ignored. And a lot of buildings would be horrible if they were ignored for a decade plus. But there are some kind of fun vibes, unique vibes, and the fans make all those happen at the Coliseum. And so that is rotten. There's no other way to put it.
Absolutely. Colby, you got anything for these guys?
On Oakland? No. It's
he's moved on from Oakland.
Well, no, like my thing with Oakland is that I've never been to the ballpark, so I can't speak to that. But
I have once, and it was fine, right? Like there was nothing that like really like stood out or anything that broke that day or anything. It was a pretty uninteresting trip there.
Yeah, but, I mean, for me, my memories of the Oakland Coliseum are just those early 2000s teams. We now call them the Moneyball teams, where you just, Chavez and Tejada and Zito and Mulder and Hudson. But my memory of Oakland is always going to be the Star Wars throw. It's my favorite Niehaus call. The throw of Ichiro nailing Terrence Long at third base as kind of a, welcome to the big leagues type of thing. That's my memory of Oakland. Like, so having never been in the ballpark, I can only go off of what I've seen on TV. But yeah, my enduring memory of Oakland is those really good early 2000s teams. And then Ichiro just absolutely one of the best throws I've ever seen, just nailing Terrence Long. That's my memory of the Coliseum. So yeah, just never been there. And I can't say that I'm upset about that, but also I've seen that building with playoff atmosphere and like playoff games, and I was sure would have liked to be sitting in the stands for one of those, because the energy that fans bring, Oakland A's fans bring to the ballpark when they have a reason to show up it's incredible. It's right up there with anybody in the game. So from that standpoint, yeah, I'm going to miss the Coliseum, but it's just a shame that the ownership group down there doesn't care as much as the fans do, because that could be something really special down there. And I hope Major League Baseball finds its way back to Oakland, because I think Oakland deserves a couple teams. They've been screwed over enough as a city. So that's my thoughts on Oakland. That's all I got.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. So Dan Wilson's now in the clubhouse, and really that's your former coworker. Now he's managing a big league ball club. What was your guys' reaction? Goldie, I've talked to you about this privately, but I'm sure people would love to hear your thoughts on that, as well as Gary. Just like, where were you guys when you found out that obviously Scott gets fired and that sucks, but also, hey, Dan is going to be the manager now. How did you guys feel about that? Gary, you want to start?
Pretty wild. And I feel like I think Aaron and I are both in the same boat, where there has been an adjustment period just because we have gotten to know Dan so well over the years. We've worked with him so closely. He spent a lot of time with us up in the booth. Yeah. The fact that he is in charge now is pretty wild. I think Aaron and I have talked about this a lot. And if a move was going to be made, I think we both agree that Dan is the perfect guy to step in and try and steer this thing to the finish at the end of the season, because of just his instant credibility with everyone involved, whether it's players or coaching staff or anything else. I'm not sure when he was hired if people fully realized, like, he has been around this entire time. He spends weeks at a time at all the minor league affiliates. That's why he has such a great relationship with a lot of the coaches who've come up through the ranks of the Mariners. And he obviously has known Cal Raleigh since the very beginning, and Logan Gilbert, and go down the list. So from that standpoint, he's kind of the perfect guy to try and navigate what is a very difficult situation. It's still kind of funny. In fact, I just saw him right before this call running from the arch as we passed each other. He going one way, me going the other. There he is.
In slow motion.
Mariners manager. I was in slow motion. Yes, he was moving much better than me.
And Aaron, where were you? What were your thoughts when you found out the news?
I was mowing the yard. So I was surprised, like everybody, that Dan would be the guy coming in. I mean, for context, for all the games that I've called with Dan on TV, we've stumbled into this great pregame routine and tradition where I generally physically assault Dan prior to the game. Like there are
seen the video from Ryan Dennis. Yeah,
there are and that didn't even show the body blows. There's dead arms that are given, like very severe, like knuckle pounds, but it's more like, instead of a pound, it's like if you punch someone else's knuckle at the exact same speed, angle, and time, you actually don't feel much of anything, but it looks super hardcore. And Dan and I did that. It's very weird. It's very weird to now have him be in the captain's chair, essentially. And Dan, I can speak to it from his former job that involved Gary and myself. When Dan shows up at the ballpark and comes up to the broadcast booths, he is the ultimate uplifter. It is incredible energy without being forced. Just his natural persona. It makes everybody feel better. It makes everybody happy that they're at the ballpark with Dan. We felt that. And you don't even realize it until you kind of stop and go, oh yeah, today does feel different. Like, this is awesome. Dan Wilson's here and we're going to hang out and talk about baseball for a few hours. So with that in mind, I completely understand and echo everything Gary said, why they would want him in the dugout and in the clubhouse. And it's even for a baseball lifer like Dan Wilson, who is as ingrained within the organization in so many ways, I can't imagine what kind of learning curve is going on right now. And not so much of the X's and O's, but just learning the personnel, the personalities, the structure, the processes, all of that, while also trying to balance things obviously weren't going well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But how do I come in here and affect change without just completely tearing things up and starting from scratch when there are, at the time, call it 30 some odd games left, having to learn what's happening while also trying to keep an eye open for implementing a change, a tweak here or there, because something has to change, right? It's a ridiculously delicate balance that I think would be very hard for anyone. But if there's anybody in the Mariner universe who could do it, it would be Dan Wilson.
Our chat with Goldie and Gary continues in just a moment, but first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000. Think Tyreek Hill will get more than 90.5 yards in week 1, or that Caleb Williams will throw for fewer than 236.5 yards in his debut? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. I want to talk a little bit about, some of these guys on the team. I want to start with Cal Raleigh because now he's tied Rudy York, second on the list for most home runs of any catcher through the first 4 years of their career. That's insane. Now, I'm not saying that he is on the trajectory of becoming a Hall of Famer, but I mean, the things that you hear him doing and the company that you see him in, that kind of does seem like, like this guy is pretty special, right? And then you add in how much he posts, how much he's gotten beat up, and still posts in spite of it. The broken thumb a couple of years ago. Gary, you told us about when he went down to the clubhouse in Toronto after the wild card game, and he had his hand wrapped up in a club and all that. He played through a broken tooth in his face down in Texas this year. He just got beat up in Anaheim and has cuts on his hand, and he's playing through that. And there's so many other things that have happened to him. All the balls that have kicked up and hit him in all kinds of areas. And he still plays almost every single day, plays by far the toughest position in the sport every single day, almost every single day. And obviously, we know what he's meant to this pitching staff as well. So, when you watch Cal Raleigh at this point, now that you've seen him for these, for parts of at least these last 4 years, do you see someone that's a bit more special than just your average major leaguer?
Yes, because that position, the context of the position, that is not a position right now where you're getting a lot of offensive production from when you look up and down Major League Baseball. And the fact that Cal, I think, is going to win the Gold Glove in the American League, which is great on its own. He's going to win the Gold Glove and hit 30-plus home runs in the same season, on top of the everything else that he does with the pitching staff. He's going to lead, I think. We'll see how it ends up, but he's probably going to lead the team in plate appearances. Think about that for a second. A catcher leading your team in plate appearances. That's wild. And to me, it just says what he is all about. The guy posts at a position where it's brutal to post. And it's funny because I hadn't thought about him. You mentioned him in Hall of Fame trajectory. And I've been thinking about catchers in the Hall of Fame because I feel like I've had to adjust how I look at catchers in Hall of Fame. And mostly because of Sal Perez, because I've been thinking about it in regard to him. Because honestly, I have not thought of him as a Hall of Famer. But as I think about the context of that position and that position moving forward and just the lack of production that we see from that position over multiple years, I've had to kind of readjust how I look at Sal Perez, for example. And now I'm starting to think, maybe he is a Hall of Famer. Yeah, I know his on-base percentage isn't great, but think about all the other things at that position that he has done. And if he's not going to get in, who is going to get in from that position? So to your point, Cal is a special player doing special things, and he's a great dude on top of everything else. And he is fully connected to the fan base. He's everything you could possibly want as a teammate and a player.
Right. Obviously has one of the most iconic hits in the history of the franchise as well. The nickname, the aura in general of Cal Raleigh, the big dumper in general, like he just kind of checks every single box in that way that makes him, again, to me, more special than just, a good player, right? To me, like Cal Raleigh is kind of just beyond that. Like you mentioned with the on base percentage, of Salvi, and like this year with Cal, like the batting average isn't really there. And, I see all the time, people talking, well, he's just a 210 hitter and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, like, do you see what this guy is doing? And also with catchers, like you kind of have to grade on a curve when it comes to offense. Like catchers, more often than not, they're not going to hit for a high average. They're not going to get on base a ton, but what else do they bring to the table? Cal hits a ton of home runs. He might also get 100 RBI this year. We'll see. We're again talking about the company that he's finding himself in, what he's doing behind the plate, how he works with a very diverse group of pitchers. It's really, really, really special stuff. Goldie, do you have any thoughts on Cal?
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's just really difficult to measure a lot of what he does, right? I mean, Gary mentioned that he very well could win the Gold Glove. And fortunately, we do have some measurement now in terms of what he does defensively, specifically with framing, which is huge. But like, nobody watches the game and realizes, oh, that strike that Cal just made a strike maybe just got the Mariners out of this inning a batter sooner and strands the big thumper, whoever the home run hitter is who's on deck, who would represent the go-ahead run, right? Like there are so many tiny, small, very difficult, if not impossible things to measure that he does that are just come along with his position. The game calling is something else. Like we can't measure that. And you can't tell me that a Mariners pitching staff that generally for the last, call it now 3 years, has been among the best performing pitching staffs in baseball, and there's been one mainstay behind home plate, you can't tell me that there isn't a correlation there, right? Like you can't just grab quad A catcher, throw him behind the plate, and have the exact same thing transpire on the mound for the Mariners. Like that just wouldn't happen. And I don't know how he swings a bat after going through physically the things that he goes through, but he almost does a disservice to himself by making all of us kind of feel like, oh, well, he'll just be in there tomorrow, because he's always in there tomorrow. And we don't know how much that hurts. We don't know how much time he's spending in the trainer's room, but it's a ton for both. And to have it at a premium position like that is almost immeasurable. And to the Gary's comp with Salvador Perez, who knows what the long-term future holds for Cal Raleigh. Hopefully he's a lifelong Mariner and can be a franchise icon. And he would, if he was, and he kept this up, he would be the best catcher in franchise history. I don't think there would probably be a whole lot of debate at that if he maintained a career-long track like this or something to it. But there is just enormous stability within your organization when you have that guy at that position year after year after year. It was Yadier Molina in St. Louis, Perez in Kansas City, Posey in San Francisco. It's huge for a franchise. So hopefully we're talking about Cal for a long, long time from now, but it's been just another pretty amazing season for him. And anybody who wants to talk about his batting average, you should go put your head in the sand. Like
Exactly.
Like, okay, what you want him to hit 230 with 15 home runs? I mean, come on. Like what he does a couple of things exceptionally well, and it impacts the game on a pretty regular basis.
Absolutely. I also want to ask you guys about Victor Robles, who's someone that came in at really the perfect time for this team, and has maybe you guys feel differently about this, but from the outside looking in, feels like he's quickly become the heart and soul of this team, and that's pretty abnormal for a guy that, again, I mean, first of all, had gotten not just DFA'd, like outright released by the team that he developed within, had essentially hit rock bottom in his career. Now you fast forward like 2-3 months later, he signed an extension in Seattle. He's become a fan favorite. I mean, we see him climbing the wall in right field, signing autographs in between innings and all this stuff. As you guys have come to, maybe interact with Victor and get to know him a little better, what's just your general feel for Victor and the impact he's had on this clubhouse? And Gary?
Well, I remember when he signed, Aaron and I were talking about this, and it was so easy to predict and see this all coming. We have this whole thing, this whole trajectory of the type of player he's been with the Mariners. It's been remarkable, really. And it just goes to show, too, like you never really know with a guy. And sometimes it can take a change of scenery. Sometimes it can take connecting with the right person. Sometimes he looks like he's having the greatest time in the world. Like he's just free and out there having so much fun. I wish we could all be the same in our job. But he's made a massive difference. It's hard to imagine where they would be without his contributions this year. And I just really appreciate somebody who, man, things were not going well in Washington, right? I mean, we all saw the numbers, and when we saw the struggles, and as a person, like he had no idea what was going to happen next. Right? He is in baseball limbo. And when you're in that situation, you're DFA'd, you don't know what's going to happen, where you're going to end up. Will you be on a major league roster? Will you ever play in the majors again? Like thoughts like that have to cross your mind in that situation. And to fast forward, like I can't think of another situation where a guy has been DFA'd and 70 days later ish, he gets extended by his new team. That is not something that happens. It's just remarkable.
We need Alex Mayer to look that up. Yeah. Has that ever happened before?
I'm certainly not going to do it. I'm just going to say I don't think it's ever happened. I love the whole story. I love him around as a guy because I'm someone who believes you need all kinds of different personalities in a clubhouse, and it's just having him around is just a ray of sunshine all day, which is great.
Speaking of Alex Mayer, though, I have to ask, because I mean, we all see the Mayer game winning stat on Twitter, and I always give him a hard time about that every time he comes up with something insane. I mean, he's out of his mind, right? Like like some of the stuff that he comes up with is ridiculous. I've seen his little notes that he takes sometimes, and all of his crazy diagrams and all this stuff when he's researching all this stuff. I know you guys have been in the booth with him at times. What does that whole thing look like? Does he look like a mad scientist there in the booth? Like, kind of paint the picture for us with Alex Mayer.
It's actually very neat and tidy.
Really?
He does have his little black book of stats. I have seen numerous times of like multiple Post-it notes maybe being utilized at one time. But it's pretty organized. It's not like this mad chemist with, you know, vials everywhere. It's pretty buttoned up. Alex is a total unicorn. Like I'll be honest, I can't express how fortunate Mariner fans are to have somebody like Gary, who is as multi-talented in doing everything from play-by-play to producing to podcasting to hosting, and then also having somebody like Alex, who I've literally never met anybody like him before, and I don't think I will. There have been times where he has asked Gary and or myself, guys, should I go home tonight and look this up? Because I will. It'll take a couple hours, but I'll do it. But do you think it's worth it? And almost every time we say no. I don't want you to look up the last 20 people to have cycles off of someone whose last name was a state capital in that state that the capital is in. You know, but like the thing that Gary and Alex have in common that we all strive for is that being able to come up with that note is one thing.
Yeah.
It always starts in the same place. It's having the thought to ask the question, right? There's so many times that Gary or Alex will come up with something and I'll think, oh my gosh, that's great. I never even thought to ask the question that would get to the answer. And that's the key. And it's being a really critical thinker, a creative thinker, certainly. And then being able to have the ability to actually find it, which is admittedly certainly a skill in and of itself. But none of that is worth it if you can't think of the question in the first place. And Mariner fans are really lucky to have both those guys because of that.
Right. I mean, like, what was it, a couple of weeks ago? Randy Arozarena is like the first player to hit a home run against his former team when his name includes his former team's name, or like, what? How do you think of that? Like, what is that? Like, it's incredible. And I very much appreciate it, by the way. Like, I want to make that very clear, but what in the world?
And like, I think I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's important to make the point that I think Alex has kind of two tracks. He has maybe what I would call like the carnival track, which is what that would be. Okay. And it's just, baseball is fun. This is fun. Let's have some fun and not take ourselves too seriously. Right. Yeah. Which is spectacular. And then there's that's actually really incredible and an impactful note, nugget, stat, whatever. Like, he did me a huge solid. It didn't come out to bear any fruit, but Cal homered in the final game in Oakland from batting left-handed. And then he appeared, his next at bat, I believe it was, batting right-handed. And Alex texted me and he said, hey, reminder, if he homers batting right-handed, he'll be the first catcher in baseball history to homer from both sides of the plate 3 times in a single season.
Wow.
The last player to do it, regardless of position, was actually Anthony Santander. Did it 4 times in a recent season. But something like that, like, I would never think to ask the question. I also have no ability to look that up. And so, like, I was ready for it because of Alex. Like, if he had homered batting right-handed, that would have made the call and it would have been really cool. And so he has the ability to do both, which I think given the game, right? Sometimes games call more for the carnival stuff. Sometimes games call more for the actual like hardcore baseball note, but to be able to do both is in part what makes him so unique.
Yeah. And again, I greatly appreciate it. It's I always look forward to it. There's always something to look forward to after the games now. So, guys, I started this interview asking Goldie about, what, was that moment that made you fall in love with Seattle. But what about when you guys first met? Can you tell us a story about that? Is there anything interesting about that when you guys first met? General vibe of one another, all that stuff?
Well, we talked to each other on the phone before we ever met in person, actually.
Really?
this is
We didn't
unbelievable.
realize it till later on. Yes.
So I was in Dallas calling games for the Rangers AA team, and the Mariners and the Rangers made a pretty substantial trade. They made the Cliff Lee deal. And there were multiple, I think 3 players from the team that I was broadcasting for, the Rangers AA team. There were 3 players, most notably Blake Bevan, who was traded from Texas to Seattle. And I get an email in my Goldsmith at writersbaseball.com email account from some hack named Gary Hill Jr. And he said, "Hi, I am doing the pre and post game show for the Mariners. I would love to do a phone interview with you and talk about the players that the Mariners received in the Cliff Lee deal. Do you have some time?" And so the first time that we ever spoke was actually in this very, "Well, Gary, it's great to be with you. Let me tell you about Blake Bevan. And since I'm heard in a major market, my voice will be especially deep right now." Yeah, so Gary and I spoke over the phone for an interview primarily about Blake Bevan, Matt Lawrence, and
someone else.
Yeah, which is pretty funny.
And then Gary, what were your impressions of this young 20-something-year-old Aaron Goldsmith talking about Blake Bevan and, whoever else?
That's what's funny is, like, no offense, Aaron, but we had the conversation and the Mariners season moves on, and I did not think about Aaron Goldsmith again.
No, you weren't like, "Hey, Seattle Mariners, this guy is great. You should totally hire him."
Yeah, for sure. I was the one that brought him to town. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's funny because I feel like we only realized this well after Aaron had been in town for a while. Like, oh yeah, I actually still have the audio too, which is great. I should play it sometime because.
Oh, we need it. Yes, please do. Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, the funny thing, like Gary and I think it was kind of like a slow burn when I first got here. Gary was kind of moonlighting, doing pre and post. I was just totally underwater trying to figure out what I was doing, calling Major League Baseball for the first time. And I quickly realized in talking with Gary just in the booth when he would be doing pre or post game, just kind of like his depth of knowledge, his creativity, how he thought about the game, his ability to research. And I was realizing like, okay, this isn't the Texas League anymore. And like, it's a friendship that's 100% born out of baseball. And then we just kind of year by year would spend more and more time with each other. And then we had a chance. I remember we called a game together, and it was, I don't know, my second or third year. I don't think it was the first year, but it was relatively early. And I remember we went to break during the game, and we were pretty good friends at this point. Mm-hmm. And we take our headsets off, and it's a beautiful day at T-Mobile Park, and we're looking out on the crowd, and Kendry Morales probably just hit a home run. And I say to Gary, I'm like, "Hey, when's the last time you did a Mariners game, man?" And he looked at me and he said, "This is my first one." What? I was like, "Oh my God, like this is a big deal." And of course, now I've seen Gary, call 60 Mariner games a year at some point. So he's my best friend now and has been for a long time. And we spend basically every waking moment together during the baseball season. And we still talk constantly during the off season. But it all started with a phone interview from Seattle to Texas, oddly enough.
I love it. I actually wanted to ask about, both of you kind of finding your way in this, and maybe doing that a little bit together, right? Because like you just said, it was, your first couple of years, doing play-by-play of an actual Major League Baseball team, Aaron. And then for Gary, you started doing you actually started hopping on the broadcast. Did you guys maybe, play off of one another, maybe help each other kind of figure out your lane in doing that? Anything like were you guys able to help each other along the way as you started to get more comfortable in doing that?
Oh, it's constantly for me. Aaron has made me better in every way possible, and not just on the air stuff, just our conversations off the air. Because I think the thing that we have in common, which I think is really important for what we do, is just a curiosity about what is happening. And it can be big stuff or just the littlest tiny thing. And we are constantly talking about what's happening on the baseball field, but also we're constantly talking about the craft. Like, we both really love play-by-play, and we both strive to be as good as we possibly can be. And we have, I think, found each other to be great sounding boards on talking situations through. Whether you make a call, and generally we're never thrilled with a call we make. So we're like, how could I have done it different? It's those kind of conversations that have made me. I would not be where I am today without Aaron. There's no question about that. And seeing the way he goes about it has just made me so much better over time. And we just have fun too, which is a great element to what we do, right? Baseball should be fun, and it feels like, at least I hope people feel like, that they are with us. They're on the inside. When there's an inside joke, you're part of the joke with us. You're having a good time with us, and I hope people feel that way.
Yeah, I think when I started, Gary and I had, I wouldn't say separate strengths, but we had separate levels of experience. Like, I had probably called more innings lifetime than Gary, because I had done a number of years in the minors, and you just accumulate innings. And Gary, on the other hand, what he didn't have in innings, he had a much better feel for the game, and additionally, and maybe more specifically, the Mariners, right? He's the ultimate Mariner resource. And so I think as the years have gone on and we've both kind of shared our strengths with one another, or like maybe where one of us was like had a head start than the other, it's become more neck and neck. Now, Gary will always have 1979 Mariner knowledge over me. I don't think that's a debate. But like, now we've gotten to the point where we really are on the same wavelength generally on so many things. And my favorite part of the day is we do this utterly stupid 5-minute segment on the pregame show. And it's so dumb, it doesn't even have a name. And we've done it for 2 years now. And
yeah, if anyone has any thoughts on a name, feel free. Fire up.
It's like Colby and I on our Patreon. We do like we have like tiers on our Patreon, of course, right? And so for like our tiers 2s and 3s, we do an additional show. And at first we were just like, we're just gonna call it Control the Zone Mondays, right? Because like it comes out on Monday. That's what it's gonna be. We'll figure out a name eventually. 3 years later, it's still CTZ Mondays.
Well, next year will be year 3 for this segment, and so we're desperately looking for something. And I know it doesn't sound like much for people from the outside, and by people from the outside, I mean literally anyone but Gary and myself, who don't host a 5-minute segment every day for 6 months, essentially. But there are times in a long season where you're like, what are we going to talk about for 5 minutes? Because we've talked about everything that we possibly can, and we're out. And maybe the Mariners are in a bad spot, right? And it's like, well, where are we going with this now?
Colby, that's totally not relatable whatsoever.
Yeah, you guys can't relate to that. And 5 minutes is a lot of airtime if you can't hang with your partner and you don't have anything to say. And I would say 5 days out of 7, when we sit down and put the headsets on at, call it 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon to tape this segment. One of us looks at the other and almost always says this: I've got something that'll get us off the ground. It's like, okay, great.
There we go.
And sometimes we tell each other what it is. Other times we just kind of airdrop it on them. But the point is, like, we just need to take flight. We literally just need to get the plane in the air. And once we get it going, we've got enough between the two of us that not only can we survive 5 minutes, but like hopefully people are like, oh, that was really fun. That was a great 5 minutes. And of the 5 minutes, 90 seconds is usually one of us just assaulting the other one verbally about something, which is great. I mean, like, it's great when you work with somebody and you know that, like, you can basically say anything to this guy and we're both on the same team. Like, we both love each other and we know that we're just having a fun time. So it's my favorite 5 minutes of the day. There's almost never been a time where we've pressed the red button to press stop and then we've said, that was terrible. I'm sure it's happened. But it's just, that's what anybody can relate to when you're just hanging out with your friend and you're just talking about something that you both like talking about. Like, more times than not, it turns out to be pretty okay.
Absolutely.
It's fun.
All right.
We work similar in that we kind of work this as a lifestyle, this job. Like, we don't prep for a game necessarily. We are always curious. We're reading and listening and just always paying attention to not only what's going on with the Mariners, but what's going on with other teams and with the game and everything. And we both kind of operate that way, which just lends itself to, I think, some really good conversations along the way.
Absolutely. So I can't in this interview without Colby's gonna hate me for this without look he's already making the face. Goldie, the last time we had you on, you didn't know this, but you provided us with the greatest moment in the history of this show. All right. And it was when, and by the way, that's not just me speaking, by the way, that's a lot of our listeners mentioned this. You. It's mostly me, but we all pick on Colby around these parts. So Colby has been collecting the cards of each Jerry Dipoto acquisition, right? And he mentioned this to you. He brought this up to you. And you said you couldn't think of a more worthless endeavor than that. And you could see the joy just drain from Colby's face live on
trying to do something that made me happy, man. I thought it was cool.
So we've made the joke now because when we got Gary on last time, Colby mentioned it to Gary and Gary was like, yeah, that's awesome, man. Oh, yeah. So now Colby considers Gary his best friend and you his mortal enemy.
Well, Gary, we know if this hasn't been established in the last hour, Gary's just a generally better person and just a warm, kind human being. I mean, he's a kid from Tacoma, for goodness sakes, right? And you know, I do stand by what I said. That sounds terrible. But Colby, out of genuine curiosity, not just as a baseball person, one to another, but as someone who I hope one day you can consider a friend. How's the collection going?
I'm about 85% of the way there. And, you know, obviously Jerry's not going to stop making moves. So it's as long as he's here, it's a never ending project, but yeah, not too bad. Until recently I found out there is not a standalone Justin Topa card anywhere on this planet.
But it just happened. I saw that it has happened, didn't it, this year?
I have not seen there.
Come on, Colby.
The only baseball card that has Justin Topa on it that I have seen is a team picture of the Seattle Mariners from 2023.
Okay,
so
first of all, not good enough.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Do better. Do better.
Second of all, not that I track Justin Topa trading cards, but I think he retweeted, like, probably at this point, like months ago, something about, maybe it was Topps, and he said my first ever baseball card. So let me help you with your worthless endeavor. Okay,
there we go.
What's your
Sure.
last card
Sure.
to the collection? Who are we talking about?
They just picked him up from Baltimore. I just recently got the card.
Terran Vavra.
Yeah, who's no longer even in the org, but he played in the big leagues, and he was acquired by Jerry DePoto, so I do have to get the card. So that's the last one I've got.
And what are we going sheets? Are we going hard case here? Are these what's on the wall behind you? What are we doing?
No. These are in sheets. They're in a binder. And then I've got them in chronological order. So yeah, it's been something.
And is this eBay your primary means of purchase?
Mostly, yeah.
And so somebody's selling a Nick Rumbelow card on eBay for $1, thinking,
That's
and
me.
it's been on eBay for 5 years.
I'm helping people, small businesses. Yes.
Who was the one guy that you bought for like the shipping was more than the actual cost of the card?
Oh, that's a lot.
That's what I was thinking. Like I was thinking the exact same thing. Like he must have eaten so much money in shipping over the actual cost of the card.
But I think we did the math, and it actually would have cost, like, the person paid to give you the card essentially.
Yeah, because it was free shipping, and I only paid like a nickel for the card.
Buy it now, 10 cents.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It was actually like a fairly like decent, like recognizable player. It wasn't the Ryan Strasburg card I looked so hard.
Oh yeah,
for.
wasn't it like Colin Cowgill or someone like that?
Yeah, it was Cowgill.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go.
So,
yeah, you should hear some of the crazy names he mentions to me. He's like, I got this card. I'm like,
who?
Am I supposed to be excited for you?
I've been wanting to play a game for a while where it was like, hey, I'm going to read you this name, and you tell me this is either somebody I went to high school with or this is a Jerry DePoto acquisition.
Great game.
Yeah,
it's a good game.
So
it's a good game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I had to bring that up because Colby had a bone to pick with you, and I couldn't let this this whole record.
I just likes to be an instigator, is what it really is.
That's true too. I also do love to do that. Yeah.
Colby does seem aggressive by nature, so I am
right.
I'm a little scared right now.
But yeah, so I couldn't let this whole recording go without mentioning that. It's Goldie, you are in the Locked On Mariners Hall of Fame just for that moment alone.
I'm so happy about that. That's terrific.
Yeah, there we go. We'll hang the banner. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for doing this. This was so much fun. I was looking forward to this all week because obviously I love the work that you guys do. Love listening to you guys both on the broadcast, both on the radio, and Goldie obviously on TV. Would love to hear you guys or see you guys both on TV sometime. We need to find a way to make that happen. But thank you guys so much. And good luck with the rest of the year. We'll see what happens with this team over the final few weeks. And so thanks, guys.
Hey, it's been great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And that's going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Now head on over to Locked On Seahawks to get all the latest on the Hawks before the season kicks off this Sunday with Corbin Smith and the gang. And tell them Ty and Colby sent you. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.